Judicial Service Commission will begin interviewing candidates today for various vacant positions. The JSC has shortlisted 42 candidates to fill 24 vacancies at various superior courts across South Africa, including the Supreme Court of Appeal and several judicial leadership positions. Tumaole Mohlaoli is tracking that for you, and he is standing by to be in conversation with a legal analyst. Good morning to me.
Very good morning to you, Dudu, and indeed it's all systems go. I can tell you that right now behind closed doors there's a meeting of the Commission whereby of course we are informed that that meeting will be ironing out various processes of how this particular process of the interviews will be panning out. We certainly don't expect any real challenges or any real controversies in terms of the processes and how it's going to run out. We will be briefed once that particular process is finished around about just before noon about what is the way forward. But at noon, that's when, of course, the interviews will begin in earnest. And today we are looking at the Supreme Court of Appeals. We should have at least about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 interviews. And then tomorrow as well, they will continue for the Supreme Court of Appeal. I can just give you a highlight as to who the names that we can expect to be interviewed. That will include Judge A.M. Mohlaoli, who will open up the interviews. She will be followed by Judge G. Hossan, and then after that, after the lunch break, we will have Judge Kuhn, Judge Mohlaoli, that is between 2 and 3:20, and of course Judge P.A. Meyer at 3:20 to 4, and that day will be then wrapped up by Judge D.S. Molefe. That interview will happen at between 4 and 20 to 5. So this is the provisional schedule as we have been given. Of course, we have been advised that the schedule might be, open to some changes here and there, but we don't expect any major changes or disruptions to the schedule. Let's bring in our legal expert, Mr. Benedict Piri, to give us an idea about these particular interviews. Mr. Piri, the issue of the Supreme Court of Appeal. Why is the Supreme Court of Appeal such a key, vacancies that need to be filled and a key court in terms of the appellate courts of South Africa?
Yeah, the Supreme Court of Appeal is the highest court in the land for non-constitutional matters. It sets really the standard around how laws are to be interpreted and developed by the lower courts. So, the fact that there's 5 vacancies in that court is actually quite a big deal. And there's 11 candidates. I think in the last term, this year, August to September, there were more acting judges on the Supreme Court of Appeal than ever before, which is unprecedented. So this is a really important set of interviews for that particular court. It is an important court in our jurisprudence.
Now, Mr. Piri, the fact that you just raised about the acting judges in this particular court, previous to this particular process, has it hampered its operations or its credibility in terms of the view of the general public, do you think?
I think its credibility has not been hampered. Certainly as a legal practitioner, that still is one of the most well-functioning courts. Judgments are turned around at really rapid pace and quickly. We know that it hasn't been without its problems. We heard Justice Meyer talking about some of the problems in the Supreme Court of Appeal, and there's been quite a high turnover rate in the last, let's call it 2 decades. I think they've lost 171 years of collective legal experience. So these are crucial interviews to keep the work of the Supreme Court at the level that we've currently experienced it and the jurisprudence of the country going.
We see that, of course, Justice Meyer's exit, if one would call it that, from this particular court, going to the apex court of the land. Some are seeing that, her leadership in that particular court was something that led to its high turnaround and its high work ethic. Do you think that the next candidate will certainly have their work cut out to try and fill those shoes, or would the JSC already have in mind how to manage that particular process?
I think the JSC would be acutely aware of the role the Supreme Court of Appeal plays, but I think you lead to a broader question of transformation. There's a question around do we have sufficient female judicial leaders in the system? And we've got also in the coming days, interviews for 5 judicial leadership positions. Unfortunately, only 1 or 2 of them can be occupied by a female. But I think that sort of debate will be a live one, given just the dearth of female jurist leaders. Now that Justice Maya has now gone up to the Constitutional Court as well.
And previous sittings of the JSC on the issue of transformation, particularly female leaders in the judiciary, many had complained that the workload that is taken to be on the bench is quite heavy, and many also leave the profession to start families or to start private practice. Why is it that this issue of female leaders in the judiciary is not something that is hyped up even more and trumped up as something that should be a priority for the judiciary?
I think the judiciary, like many parts of South African society, is quite far behind, and it was really encouraging to hear Justice Maya speak to aspects like this with a conviction, and having taken the lead while she was at the SCA. I would like to believe that sort of work would continue, and certainly it has come up as a conversational point that requires some work. I mean, I think there's also another question around just who applies to these judges' positions as a whole, given, there's a vacancy on the Constitutional Court, but there weren't enough nominations. So I think there's a broader conversation to be had just simply about, what is required and how do you make that role one that will attract the diverse skill set that is required, as per the Constitution.
The issue of transformation in general, Mr. Phiri, do you think it is, just restricted to the issue of gender and race, or is it an issue of a broader kind of conversation where we look at even parity in terms of youth or in terms of ageism, as has been criticized in terms of the profile of the judiciary, saying that it's male and it's very much male-dominated, male middle-age dominated. Is that a conversation that's also worth being looked into when this whole process is undertaken?
I think the transformational component is a lot broader than simply gender. One of the things that I think would have been discussed earlier this morning would have been, the criteria that are going to be utilized to assess the judges, and particularly those that are in judicial leadership positions, because the last time these criteria were adopted in earnest was in 2010. So, I'd love to see how that comes out into the criteria in sort of just trying to give effect to that obligation that the judiciary must broadly reflect the demographics of society as a whole, which is a constitutional obligation, in fact. So it is a broader question than simply gender. But being a judge does require a lot of skill, a lot of experience. So some of those factors play into that, I suppose.
Mr. Phiri, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much. So that was Benedict Phiri, a legal expert, just giving us his overview and some analysis in terms of the processes here as they get underway. And of course, we'll be bringing you that first interview at noon when it does kick off. And that, of course, will be with Judge A.M. Mohlaoli. With that, it's back to you in the studio, Dudu.